All right, guys. So I kind of want to just go through and talk about the LS swap into a 350Z or G35. So I did a lot of research while I was doing my swap, and I'll go over my swap a little bit for people that are new and watching this and not really aware of it. So I'll kind of go over this, assuming that we're not understanding much about the LS swap, because I think a lot of people that are transitioning from the 350Z or G35 and are doing an LS swap, there's probably a large percentage that are not very familiar with the LS engine to begin with. So I'm going to kind of cover some of the basics with that too. So let's just get right into it. So assuming that we wanted to do an LS swap into G35, so there's some things you should think about ahead of time. So in my case, I was a little bit familiar with LS swaps because I've done them before in other vehicles. So there's some things that you should consider and look into, research before you just start buying stuff. So want to be, I'd say, choosing an engine. So there's a couple different things you want to watch out for with the engines, and understanding what your goals are and what you want to do with the engine. So you have truck engines, you have like the LS1 car type engines. The accessory drives are all different. The cranks are different, meaning there's a reluctor wheel on the back of the crank that the crank sensor reads. That's what the 24X and the 58X mean. So you're going to need different computers to run these things. So you wouldn't want to buy an older Gen 3 24X engine and try to run it with a 58X computer. Just some other considerations, and I'll go over that a little bit more when we get to the wiring part. And you also want to decide if you want to do a drive-by cable or a drive-by-wire. So there's two different types of throttle bodies that you can use with these engines also, and that's going to determine what type of engine management system you should be using. All right, so there's a couple different things with the transmissions also. So typically, like a lot of times people are using the LS1 engine with the T56 transmission, which is fine, but there's other options out there, and there's other kits available that'll allow you to use the Nissan transmission to mate up with it. So there's some kits that it's like an adapter plate that bolt the factory engine to the transmission. There's a kit that changes the bell housing. So you would want to know this, kind of what you would want to do when you're buying a kit, because that's going to change your transmission mounting point. It's going to change your shift point. It's going to change drive shaft and possibly engine positioning. It definitely determines what type of clutch and flywheel you're going to have to use. So there's some of the kits use like a custom flywheel with a clutch that has the Nissan input shaft that bolts up to the Chevy stuff. So we'll go over the different types of kits a little bit later. And the big part is understanding what's your budget. So I'll keep going back to it. Like, what are your goals and what are your budget? What do you want to do with this thing, and how much money and time do you have? So I also put a range 3K to 20K. So I did mine including buying a new transmission because mine was bad. I was about $3,500 for mine. So excluding the transmission, I did it for under $3,000, but it was just like a very basic running and driving swap. Oh, and I put all the way up to 20K because there's companies, a couple of companies I'll go over will even do the swap for you. So one company will even let you buy an engine included in the installation. So that's kind of cool. So skill set, understanding your skill set. What tools do you have? Can you weld? And how much punishment are you willing to accept? So in my case, I did it very cheap because I built a lot of the stuff. I built the mounts. I built the oil pan. I reused the factory drive shaft and shift point. I built everything. So how much punishment can you take? Because if you're doing it that route, it's going to be more challenging. And in my case now, I was new to welding, so I took it as an experience to learn how to do TIG welding with aluminum. And the pan had some issues, so I'm going to be going back over it over the winter and rebuilding the pan. So how much are you willing to deal with? How much headache are you willing to deal with? So again, goals. Do you want it to just run, drive, and rip? Do you want to just slap the engine in there? You don't care if like your gauges work. You'd have air conditioning, power steering. If it's just like a drift missile and you're just going to thrash it and run it into walls and shit, then you might not want to take all the extra time and spend the extra money to do power steering and air conditioning. The power steering is pretty easy, but you might not need air conditioning. So And then the big part, especially with the wiring, is going to be retention of the factory gauges. Some of the gauges run on a CAN bus system, so when you do the swap or you pull the computer out, like your tach, your coolant temp, and your oil pressure, and a bunch of stuff is not going to work. The oil pressure actually doesn't run on the CAN bus, but when you remove the factory wiring, none of that stuff is going to work. So just some initial considerations, and I'll kind of walk you through some of the stuff I've learned, and I wanted to just kind of throw all this together as a unload my brain and what I've learned over the last couple months trying to research this damn thing. All right, so this is kind of going to be basic, going over what you need: engine mounts, trans mount, engine to transmission adapter. If you're keeping the CDO1 or CDO9 Nissan transmission, you need an adapter plate. If you're going to be using a GM transmission, like a T56, a 4L80, a TH400, those will just bolt up right to the engine, and you can use the factory GM clutch or flex plate and torque converter, depending if you're doing manual or automatic. You'll need exhaust, oil pan and pickup tube. Oil pan and pickup tube can be kind of tricky, and there's a couple different types of pans. Field Racing offers a kit that actually has a rear sump because the engine position is so far back that they still offer a rear sump oil pan, but a lot of the other swap pans are a front sump style, so you'll have to get the pickup tube that works with the pan, and you'll want to make sure that the engine mounts and transmission mount and everything jives so you can get everything to bolt in there and get the oil pan to fit because it's really tight. So you're going to have to do an oil filter relocation kit. The LS oil pans have like a big filter and it hits some of the framework, and you'll end up having to relocate the oil filter. Drive shaft, I kept my drive shaft, so that's why my engine is farther forward than some of the other ones. I'll go over that in a little bit, but I kept the factory drive shaft, but a lot of the other kits out there require a custom drive shaft. So clutch line and master, when I did mine, I used a T56 slave cylinder on the transmission, so I ended up having to use a different master cylinder, and I changed the clutch line also. Shifter relocation, depending on the transmission that you get, it's going to be shifting the transmission back. So if you're keeping the CDO9 or the CDO1 Nissan transmission, the whole position of the transmission is shifted backwards, so you need to relocate the shift point so it still comes up through the same hole. There's different shifter relocation options and a few different accessory drives. What do you want to do there? Do you want to keep the LS1 or the GM accessory drive? Do you want to make your own? I built my whole accessory drive, and there's one company that actually integrates some of the Nissan and the GM components together into one accessory drive setup, so that one's pretty cool. Power steering lines, and then engine management and harness. Moving on. So finding kits. This is just a list of some of the kits, companies that are out there, and they offer different things and different levels of kits and varying different price ranges. So LOJ probably has the in my opinion, the nicest, most complete kit, and probably has the best factory integration also. So, and they also offer install. So if you want to drop your car off, they'll do the whole install and sell you an engine, and you can just drop it off and get it done. So Siki, they also offer installs. Field Racing, they're kind of pricey. The descriptions on their website and pictures are very vague. Some of the items on the website don't even have pictures. But the positioning is the farthest back out of all the kits, and it still maintains the rear sump for the oil pan. ISR Performance, Collins Performance. Collins doesn't make a whole lot. They do make the adapter kit to bolt the Nissan transmission to the GM engine, but the downside there is you have to actually cut the Nissan transmission. You have to cut the bell housing off. So if you wanted to reuse it or resell it, you wouldn't really be able to do that. So that's the one that I used. It was one of the cheaper options. That's why I went that way. They do also offer a shifter relocation service. You can send them your bracket. They'll cut it, weld it up, and then send it back to you. In Juku Racing, I would consider them more of a distributor because they do have Field Racing. They do have ISR Performance. They do have wiring specialties harnesses. They have a lot of things that are sold at these companies, but a lot of the prices are cheaper. So that's just one thing to consider while you're looking around. If you want to save a couple $100, like the oil pan, I think is like $100 cheaper. The harness is $100 cheaper. So we'll actually go through and look at the website. And then CX Racing, and I mentioned wiring specialties. All right, so how does it fit? This is the big question that I always got when I was starting to do this. People asking me, how the hell is that thing going to fit in there? You're going to put that big V8 in that little car that had a V6, and I made this picture a while back, and it's just a comparison of an LS1 compared to the VQ. So one of the challenges that I got was that the VQ is fully dressed, so it makes it look a lot bigger, but the physical size is actually bigger, and I believe the weight is like within 20 pounds or something like that. So the engine physically is not bigger, so it's actually not really that hard to get it in there. All right, so just a quick rundown of my swap. You can see the oil pan. I did build the oil pan, so that was all completely custom, cut up out of 3/16 aluminum plate. You can see the engine mount. I built that out of just hardware store metal and bolted it to the factory rubber engine mount. So all of the stuff that I did to put this thing in there was custom made. I made the exhaust and welded that into the factory exhaust, and yeah, so that's just how I did it, and that's how I was able to do it for so cheap. So here was just a test fit. Here you can see the factory radiator support is a little bit tight to the throttle body because I do have the engine farther forward because I kept the factory drive shaft and transmission mounting point. So I ended up making a different radiator support that pulled the radiator farther forward and a little bit lower, and ended up working pretty good. So now we'll start getting into the kit. LOJ conversion. So like I said, this one is probably the most complete. So I'm just showing the ranges here. Basic swap kit to your ultimate kit. And another really good reference on this is the Sloppy Mechanics YouTube channel. He ended up putting the ultimate kit in a G35, and he goes over the whole kit. So if you want to go check that one out, he talks a lot about the kit and how complete it is. It's like every single nut and bolt and wire and everything to just completely drop the whole thing in there. And it's actually a really nice kit, but a little over my price range. So you can see at the bottom there, they do offer a kit, ultimate kit with an engine too. So if you didn't even have an engine, you could get the engine with it. So here is the LOJ website, and it kind of, if you go into the Nissan 350Z kits, it talks about the different levels of the kits. So basic kit gets you just what you need to get the engine in the car, and then you can just continue to upgrade as you go to your kind of one-stop shop, as they call it. One-stop shop to get the whole thing in the car, running and driving with factory integration and everything. You can see that they kind of use the same pictures for a lot of these, looks like. But there's also different types of ultimate kits. So you have one for 4L80 automatic transmission, the 6L80, 6L90, the T56 GM manual transmission, TH400, and the Nissan Z33 transmission, which would be the CDO1 or CDO9. But you can see the difference here is this has a custom flywheel that's made and has a different starter and has the adapter plate to adapt the Nissan transmission to the GM engine. So that's going to be one of the bigger differences there. And these are quite a bit cheaper because they retain the GM transmissions. So if we click into this ultimate kit, we'll just go all the way into it to show you what the most complete kit would look like. So there's a lot of other options on here. So you can add a drive shaft. You can add air conditioning, which their wiring integration will also run the air conditioning. You can get the computer, clutch. I mean, so if you were to go through and get everything, it ends up bumping the price up quite a bit. But it'll give you the computer, clutch kit, bolts, pressure plate bolts, water pump, crank pulley. So this is where it's a little tricky here because you need to use the LSA water pump with this kit. So you have to get the LSA water pump and crank pulley. So it adds a little bit more cost, but it's a really nice kit and gets it all in there for you. So that would be like the most expensive kit you can probably find, but it comes with everything. New radiator, everything that you need. So one of the cool things about this one is they also use, the wiring harness includes the CAN bus factory integration, so all your gauges work, your air conditioning controls, everything works. This one only uses the E38 ECM. So the E38 is going to be the 58X crank. So this is going to be the newer style engine, which is like 06, 07 and up. So that would be one other consideration there, is like if you picked up an LS1 or like a 2002 5.3 from a Silverado or something, and then you tried to use this computer and wire harness, it wouldn't end up actually running the car. So that's just something to keep in mind there, because this E38 is for the 58X computer. So moving on to Fueled Racing. So this is kind of what their website looks like. So here's a website. They got all kinds of fancy cars in there. So let's look at the 350Z and just see what they offer. So this is what I was talking about here. These two little holes are where the oil comes through out of the block and then through the filter and back into the block. So this is on the rear of the engine. So that's where this one's a little different, has the rear sump because it's so far back. But this is your oil filter relocation kit. And you can see it all, they offer a bunch of stuff, but this is what I was talking about here. So like the turbo manifolds, and they got a lot of things on here that don't have an image, and they're kind of almost just like factory pictures. So not very clear. I guess I don't really like that. But here, if you wanted to look at the full complete installation kit, $3,300. Comes with mounts, transmission mount, drive shaft, headers, oil pan, relocation kit. But one thing to consider is that I believe this is only for a T56 transmission. So here's your transmission option. So if you wanted to keep your CD09, or if you wanted to run 4L80, you'd still end up having to do something different with the transmission mounting. And that would also probably change your drive shaft length. Drive shaft length, because the kit includes a drive shaft. So just keep that in mind when you're picking your transmission and what kind of kit that you would actually want to get. Alrighty, ISR performance. So here you can see another picture of an oil pan, and this is what I'm talking about when I say it has a front sump, so that you can see the transmission towards the back, and then the front sump is actually in the front portion of that cross member there. So there's the difference in the oil pans, really. And this one is showing from the underside of the car. This is showing the ISR performance adapter plate with the CD01 or CD09 Nissan transmission. But you can see the adapter plate. It has the custom flywheel, has the custom starter, shifter relocation, and everything that you need to get that in the car. Let's look at the website. So we look at Nissan 350Z and G35 options. See, we got 720, but a lot of this stuff too is out of stock. So at the time of this video, this stuff is out of stock. So there's your kit. Here's another shifter relocation option for your T56 transmission, $400. If you're going to be changing transmission or moving the positioning, that's why I didn't want to do that. Just because of the cost. I want to try to do it as cheap as I could just to drive it. If you're moving that stuff, you're going to have to change shifter relocation, or you're going to have to change your shift point and everything. All right, so here is the ISR kit. So if we choose our transmission, so it has a select a transmission option. These are both Nissan transmissions, but I believe the difference there is going to be in the slave cylinder, because the slave cylinder was different on the later model. One had a fork and one had like the center bearing, or the center slave that went over the shaft. So what does the kit include? It has the adapter plate, flywheel, starter, heat shield, pilot bushing, shifter bracket, linkage adapter. So this kit right here doesn't have a lot of other things. Doesn't have oil pan. It doesn't have mounts. It doesn't have exhaust. It doesn't have drive shaft. So you'll still have to source those. So that's $2,000 just to basically get the transmission bolted to the engine. So here is what the pan would look like. So you'd have to add the pan and then the exhaust, another $680. So ISR performance. All right, so next one we got is Sickie. This one is a little bit cheaper, But you can see at the bottom left there, 17, 18,000. This is when they offer a complete install also. So you can drop your car off and they'll put it in. And I believe that even includes an engine. Yep. So that one includes the engine, LS2, LS3, or other option engines, and that's completely installed. And on the right side here, you can see the 5282. I just added the kit with all the options. So this is going to include wiring harness and oil pan and everything. So Siki and then Nissan swap kits. They actually got quite a bit of stuff on this place. So here you have your different levels of swap kits. So you have, some of these are 240SX, some of them are 350Z. So you have stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. So if we look at the stage 3 350Z kit, was the one I had in the picture before. So the base price is $44.99, and then you can add options for motor mount, header size, master cylinder kit. So this is including 7/8 Willwood master cylinder. So the 52 price that I had before was including all these options. So let's go through it. If we added all the options that you have with this kit, fuel line kit, injector type. So this EV1, EV6 is just the plug type. So like the EV1 or like the truck style injectors. So we can add some O2 sensors. Let's say we're staying with the Nissan 6-speed transmission. They'll tune your computer for you to get it started up. Let's say we needed that. So we'll add that thing. Put it in a G35, 2004. So it started as a manual. I want to add the oil pressure sensor, so that works. Factory gauge for the oil, and then we can leave the grounding kit out. So it comes out about 53. So that's going to give you all that stuff. Basically, get it in there, get it wired, and this is actually a pretty complete kit for the price. So this one's really not so bad. So Siki, we'll run through CX Racing quick. So CX Racing also has a kit. This is for the T56 transmissions. I don't believe they have an option for the CD09s. You can see they have mounts, oil pan, exhaust, pickup tube, and that's about as complete as their kit's going to get. And you can still get, you have to get drive shaft made and all that other stuff. So looks cheaper, but don't forget about all the extra stuff that you got to get to actually get the thing to work. So in Juku, so you can see the 720 range on there. It's actually cheaper for the oil pan. The whole kit is cheaper. The exhaust is cheaper. The ISR Performance swap mount kit, that's all cheaper. So same stuff, same company, just at a different place, and it ends up being cheaper. So here's Collins. This is the adapter kit. So you have the aluminum plate, the big aluminum plate. You cut the bell housing off, and then you can adapt your transmission to the GM engine, your Nissan transmission to the GM engine. But you use the GM flywheel and GM pressure plate, and they have a custom clutch disc that has the GM pattern with the Nissan input shaft on it. So it's kind of a unique clutch disc, but some other things to keep in mind there. So they do offer the shifter relocation, but they don't have like a complete kit to drop it in with mounts and drive shaft and everything else. So if you're going to do how I did it, where you're planning on getting everything from somewhere else or making it, that's why I went with this one, because it ended up being the cheapest option, and that was my goal, was to just do it cheap and get it in the car. All right, so wiring and ECU options. So this is where I would say it can get kind of tricky, or you might end up buying the wrong stuff. So the 24X is in like the 99 to 2006-ish engines. I believe they started the 58X actually in like 05 to 07. There was like some overlap time in there where you have the 24X crank or the 58X crank. Definitely by 2007 and up, but like I said, there's some overlap in there with there's like a Gen 3.5 where they're kind of using the newer rods on the old crank and stuff. So the way you would identify that, if you're not really sure, the 24X has a black crank sensor plug, and the 58X has a gray crank sensor plug. So the crank sensor plug is on the passenger side on the block right behind where the starter would be mounted. So if you're not sure about it, you'll be able to verify it that way. And you'll want to know if you're going to do a drive-by cable or drive-by-wire. A lot of the harnesses and stuff like from Wiring Specialties wants you to use a drive-by cable setup, drive-by cable throttle body and computer. The LOJ kit that uses the E38, you can do drive-by-wire on that one. So I believe you'd even be able to do cruise control. That should work with that one. So the CAN bus ECUs would be the E38 and the E40. You probably wouldn't really use an E40. There's also like an E67, but one's going to be a 24X and one's going to be a 58X. So the Wiring Specialties also offers a harness with the Lingenfelter box, which allows you to put a 58X engine into a car that's ran by a 24X computer. So it'll do a conversion, but it doesn't do it the other way. So the common ECUs that you'll probably be using are the P01 or the 0411 ECU, which has a red-blue connector, and P59 has a green and blue connector. And that's actually an option that you would select on the Wiring Specialties website, and I'll get into that. Plugs look very similar. They can actually be plugged into different computers. If you change the color on the red and the green plug, you can swap them out, but then you also have to do some repinning. So it's best to just have the right harness with the right computer so you know that it's going to work. All right, so one thing I didn't mention here yet is for wiring, you can do your own standalone wire harness. So I have a couple videos on doing that. That's how I did mine. You just basically rework the harness, delete all the old wires, take all the old wires out that you don't need to run the engine, and it can be done pretty cheaply. It's no additional cost if you have the harness. I think I paid like $10 for a fuse block and then wired everything in myself, but that's also another option if you didn't want to buy the wire harness. So we got some options for the 350Zs, LS, RB, and 2J wiring. So these harnesses can get kind of pricey, but you have a couple options that say CAN bus with them. So the CAN bus wiring will basically do all of your factory integration for all of your gauges and your controls and everything. So you can see we have a couple options here for 350Z, LS1, and LSX Gen 4 drive-by cable. So the difference between the other one and this Gen 4 is you have the option for the 24X and the 58X. So this is going to add the Lingenfelter control box that allows you to put the 58X engine into the 24X control engine management. So your computer that's made to control the 24X crank will allow you to put the newer generation in there if you were to select these options and then select which computer plug option you have. So your PCM option, this is what I was talking about before, your red-blue or your blue-green. You have a couple different options there. So it's also going to let you select what kind of accessories you have, car, truck accessories, where your map sensor is going to be, because you could be using the truck intake or the car intake, so the map sensor is in the different location. So it's also asking you what type of map sensor you have, where your map sensor is, what type of map sensor you have, alternator, where your alternator is located, because the alternators can be on different sides of the vehicle, and where your cam sensor is. So if you have the newer generation LS engines have the cam sensor on the front cover, and like underneath the water pump on the front timing cover, where the older ones, the Gen 3s and older models, have the cam sensor on the back of the engine. So they want to know all these things so they know how to make your harness. Where your knock sensors are located, the newer generation doesn't have the knock sensor in the valley cover. What type of injectors, what transmission, what you're going to do with the computer. So if you need a computer, you have a computer, if you're going to do it yourself. So run through everything. You do have the options for adding oil pressure sensor and air conditioning, but this is going to run with the GM air conditioning where the LOJ kit would be using all of the Nissan accessories for like your Nissan air conditioning. So there would be your price, excluding these options that you can add. So the price will go up from there, but it'll get everything to work. All right, so this is accessory drives. So you can do a couple different things with the accessory drives. I built my whole accessory drive, so it was all custom, but it was kind of modeled after the one in the picture here with the this is the LOJ kit. The LOJ kit retains the Nissan power steering pump and the Nissan alternator and gets it all to work with the LSA water pump and LSA crank pulley. So this kit here, is the one in the picture, is just showing the kit without the air conditioning on it. So this one's kind of cool, a little pricey, but gets everything to work. And their harness also integrates all of this together. So your power steering sensor and your alternator and everything is integrated into the harness that works with the GM and the Nissan all kind of mixed together. So it's a pretty cool option. But a lower cost option would be to just run all of your, you could run truck accessories, or you could run LS1 or equivalent accessories on there, and you'd really have to just worry about your power steering line. Siki makes a power steering line. It's like $130 that adapts the LS1 power steering pump to the Nissan. So gauges, like I said before, some of your gauges aren't going to work. So in the picture here, it just shows somebody that ended up swapping out a different gauge, and some people are using like a Speed Hut tack to put in their actual factory cluster when they're not using CAN bus to still get a working tack signal. So you can get the tack signal from the computer, just send it to the gauge, and that's how it would work. But you can see in this other one, I don't think that their coolant temp sensor is working because the coolant temp runs off the CAN bus. So coolant temp and tack runs off CAN bus. So you either have to change the signals, or you either have to change the gauges or get it working through CAN bus with the CAN bus integration that is offered by the companies. So your oil pressure sensor also will not work because you don't have the factory harness in there. But I do have a video on mine getting the oil pressure sensor to work. Basically just use the GM sending unit and sent the signal right to the gauge, and it still works because it doesn't use CAN bus. The speedometer is run off the ABS sensors, so your speedometer will still work and your gas gauge will still work. But you can see in this picture, there's some warning lights on there, like the brake, the stability control. Those other things are on because the CAN bus is not working in the car. So, yeah. So overall, I'd say the swap was really easy to do. It's really not that complicated. The car comes apart really easy. Everything goes in really easy. There's not a whole lot of fitment issues that you have to worry about. I'd say it's just more technical with having to like figure out the wiring you want to do. It can be kind of expensive, but the good thing is there's kits out there for everything that you wanted to do. So if you didn't want to make anything, you could do the swap pretty quickly with basic tools if you had the budget for it, and get it done pretty quickly. I mentioned Slappy Mechanics before. I think he did his whole swap in like a day and a half or something. It was just ridiculous how fast he did it because he had that complete kit, and it was just like bloop, bloop, get everything in, get everything out, and it was all good. All right, so yeah, that's it for this one, guys. If you guys have done this swap or you're watching it and you have experience with it, and there's anything that you feel like I missed that you want to share, please leave it in the comments so other people can see it and try to learn from other people's experience before they jump into the swap. The swap can be kind of expensive, but there's also a lot of things that you could miss and end up incurring extra costs later, like if you bought the wrong engine or you spent $1,500 on a wire harness and you didn't have the right crank, stuff like that. So just wanted to put this out there to try to help people, and I feel like these cars are becoming cheap enough now that there's people actually starting to rip them apart and do this stuff just to thrash on them. So pretty cool. I wanted to get this out there and hopefully enjoyed it.